Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And we have a returning guest who has appeared twice before, which was back in March 2021 and also in October last year, 2024. Episodes 123 and 471. John Lee is the CEO and executive chairman of Silver Elephant, but also the CEO of CleanTech Vanadium Mining Corp, who we're going to speak about today, who are listed critical mineral exploration company who acquired the Campbell-Crotser Fluorspar project in Kentucky. John has an economics and engineering degree and is also a CFA charter holder and accredited investor who specializes in mining M&A and has raised over $150 million through the TSX and TXX Venture Exchange for junior mining companies in the past. He's on the podcast today, and we're going to talk about the history of CleanTech, more about the fluorspar industry, including supply and demand, and I suppose also Kentucky as a mining jurisdiction. And it's going to speak a lot more as well. So, John, welcome to the podcast again. How you doing?
Thank you very much, Rob, for the introduction. Oh my God, a blink of an eye. It's our coming out to our fourth year of acquaintance. Time flies.
Yeah, it's certainly time flies when you're having fun. And obviously you've been busy. So as we always start these podcasts off, I just wonder if you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your career, for those that haven't listened to the previous episode, so the audience understand a little bit about yourself and your background.
Certainly, I'm a Taiwanese native, and I went to England for high school. It's actually in Hampshire, not too far from where you are. And then graduated from Rice University with an engineering degree in economics in the United States. Started my career in the mid-90s in Silicon Valley when the dot-com boom started. That was when Yahoo was created and the Googles and the eBays. Stumbled onto the mining space. Have over 25 years of experience now in mining. From 2000 to 2010, I was an investor. Invested in hundreds of junior companies. Then, just like some of your audience do right now. And then the latter of 15 years, from 2010 to 2015, was started out running a company as a hobby to see how it works. And then it's been 15 years. My specialization is in precious metals, particularly silver, and the critical mineral space. I just see sort of the evolve of the world into high tech, and a lot of the minerals that used to be disregarded and ignored, finding their new homes. And in terms of the critical mineral space, we have invested in vanadium, in nickel, and just with this upcoming acquisition in the fluorspar space. These assets belong to CleanTech Vanadium, or short name for CleanTech CTV, and that's the trading symbol for our company on the Toronto Ventures Exchange. And that's a company that spun out from Silver Elephant almost 5 years ago. My foray, as you mentioned, is M&A. I've raised over $150 million through the Toronto Stock Exchange, and all the assets were sitting in Silver Elephant at the time. I think investors like to be a bit more selective and have a bit more say in the particulars verticals they want to invest. So that's why we undertake that transaction in 2021 to keep Silver Elephant as being focused in the precious metal space, and then the remaining assets, in particular the critical mineral assets we've acquired over the years, to be in CleanTech CTV.
Yeah, so obviously I wonder if you can just give us some background on CleanTech CTV. And I've heard obviously some exciting news that from the company that you guys have recently acquired a fluorspar project in Kentucky. So I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit more about that as well.
Absolutely. Well, CleanTech is a new company that spun out from Silver Elephant. There's not a reverse takeover. It is a public listed company, has a very clean structure, and about half the shares are owned by some of our existing shareholders that were inherited from Silver Elephants. And the focus of CleanTech is in the critical mineral space in North America. The flagship asset was the Gibellini Vanadium project, and we still have that project, but vanadium principal uses in rebar constructions and as well as batteries, and the world construction cycle is going through a bit of a downturn right now. Therefore, we took the opportunity to have acquired just less than a week ago. The news was on July the 2nd. This Fluorspar project in Kentucky. The address is this Kentucky-Illinois border is the most prospective fluorspar belt in the United States, with the historical production about 3.5 million tons. Having said that, U.S. does not produce fluorspar today and rely heavily on fluorspar imports from Mexico.
Obviously, we're speaking about Kentucky, and obviously when it comes to mining jurisdictions, Kentucky is, I suppose, not a name that is on everyone's speak about in terms of US mining, the mining industry. So what advantage and disadvantage they're working and mining in Kentucky, especially with obviously your fluorspar mine?
Fluorspar, right? There are, I think we've spent over $30 million scouring, exploring, and developing the Vanadium project in Nevada. So I think there is a bit of misnomer in the United States. People have the perception that U.S. is anti-mining or U.S. is no history of mining. It's quite to the contrary. As I mentioned to you, Kentucky actually has an extended history of production of fluorspar. And obviously, I mean, there are areas where a lot of coal was produced in eastern part of the United States. And in Nevada, still today, is one of the largest gold producing region in the world. And there is still zinc production and some base metal production in the Rust Belt area. When you say rust, obviously, clearly, they also had extensive iron and steel production. So I think it's gone through a bit of hiatus in the last, I would say, 50 years. However, with the new initiative from the new Republican administration, I think there is going to be a renaissance and a very conservative push to be self-sustaining. And what I mean by that is, United States today produce very small amount of critical minerals in nickel, in manganese, in cobalt, in iron, in vanadium. That's not presenting vanadium at all. Zero production in rare earth, zero production in fluorspar. And it goes down the list. Probably, if you look at the periodic table, probably 2/3 of the United States have reserves and resources and have produced in the past, of which it is not producing. And Rob, if I could just take about a couple of minutes to expand a bit further on your previous question. This project that CleanTech just acquired, the name is Campbell-Crotser. It is in Kentucky, and it is a greenfield exploration project, but had over, I would say in today's money, over $3 to $4 million spent on it. Over 60 drill holes at about 100 meter at depth have been put on the project, and with a historical resource of about close to 1 million tons of fluorspar. So that's about just over $100 million in today's fluorspar price. So I think that so that certainly removed a bit of exploration risk. The project is in an excellent location with over 30 neighboring fluorspar projects, to the very extent to varying extent of exploration or production in the past, and has excellent infrastructure. That's one thing good about United States, in that there's immediate access to power and water. And some of the plants that had used to produce fluorspar 30, 40 years ago, they're still there, obviously requiring refurbishment. And then there are other base metal plants and processing plants with spare capacities that can be retrofitted to process this fluorspar. So we consider this to be an excellent jurisdiction, and the mineralization, as what I understand it from historical drill holes, is contiguous in nature. averaging width about 3 to 5 meters, starting from surface and extends up to a kilometer in strike. So this is a very prospective project, and the company spent close to a year in evaluating different projects that are available. We're very, very fortunate and very glad to have acquired the project. If you want to expand a bit about Kentucky, Kentucky, as with all the rest of the United States, has a federal permitting and a state permitting. The project sits on the private land, so the extent of oversight and permitting required on the federal level is greatly reduced, as opposed to land that's government that will be governed then by the BLM, which is Bureau of Land Management, it takes on average 10 years to permit a mine if the mine sits on the federal land. I think Trump is trying to shorten that. So we're fortunate that the Campbell-Crotser project sits on the private land. So there's very minimal oversight from the federal perspective. And then from the permitting from the state level in Kentucky, there is not a whole lot of base metal production in Kentucky, maybe not even one. But Kentucky has oil and natural gas production. So as we're pulling down the rule regulations for extraction of natural resources, we have to sort of tailor in and try to see where this project would stand to commission into production. So it's going to be a trying process, but we do have a administration that's pro mining and pro independence of sourcing minerals, especially critical minerals, from outside of the country, especially from adversarial country. And fluorspar will certainly qualify that because majority of the fluorspar produced is from China.
Obviously, fluorspar has historically flown under the radar compared to other critical minerals like lithium or even uranium. From your perspective, what's been the most surprising or even misunderstood aspect of a fluorspar? Right.
I would say it's just been flying under the radar. As you said, it's been underappreciated and ignored, and it's just not been covered. I mean, part of the reason is you just don't see a lot of coverage on the mainstream media regarding commodities, right? They want to have the cake and eat it too. They want to have all the amenities and modernization of building roads and having all the necessities, but nobody talk about how these materials come about. So you're already talking about a very undercovered, undercovered sector, and then fluorspar is a further neglected child within the complex. The way I would say is that fluorspar, I would call it the Robin to the Batman. And what I mean by that is people talk about gold, people talk about copper, people talk about the need for steel and aluminum for the everyday and also for oil, which you need to drive a car. So the tangible, the visible elements of commodity that you use on a day-to-day basis, even though they're undercover, but they have an outlet of which that pique people's interest in investors. So fluorspar, the way I look at it, is the Robin to the Batman. Fluorspar is an essential, irreplaceable ingredient in the nuclear power production. And just quickly that fluorspar are required to levitate uranium to a gaseous state, of which the uranium is then concentrated, the U-235, you can call it enriched. And, U-35 is a lot more rare in the uranium. You mine is only 0.7%. So you have to separate the U-235 from the U-238, which is heavy uranium, the plutonium uranium, which is not fissile per se. That's just an example, but fluorspar is also involved in the production of solar energy, production of EV batteries, production of energy storage, production of refrigerant, production of semiconductors and artificial intelligence, and productions of agriculture pesticides and herbicide, and as well as in the pharmaceutical industry. So, fluorspar is in the waters and in dental and over 25% of the pharmaceutical products. So it is, I would say it is if fluorspar doesn't exist today, the world will cease to function. I think we're happy to delve into sort of the nature of fluorspar in chemistry. As I have to start brush up from my A-level chemistry, or you can dive into particular verticals on how fluorspar applies in these critical supply chain, in this sort of mission critical aspects of fluorspar application.
I'll leave that up to you. Never how you want to carry that on forward.
Okay, I think for your audience sort of reference, and fluorspar is the most reactive and corrosive element in the periodic table. And so fluorspar has been underutilized until maybe 20 years ago because it's so toxic and because it's so corrosive that it's very difficult to handle. So however, in today's technology, when you have semiconductors that are doing wafers on an atom level, you're talking about for example, right? Semiconductors used to be 50 nanos, and now you're down to 3 nano. So you're looking at everything is down to the molecular level. So in order to carve these atoms onto a silicon wafer on 100% precision, with 100% precision, you have to inject fluorspar gas in order to etch the semiconductors. And then because the corrosive nature, and then because fluorspar is used right now for aluminum and steel production as a fluxing agent. So you can imagine if you want to produce the purest aluminum, right, the purest steel, used to be you don't need those elements like you have a 5-floor building or 10-floor building, but now you're building average above is like 300, 400 floors and space-aged alloys that has to be extremely lightweight and under the extreme duress. You have to have the best of the best. And so fluorspar use is a fluxing agent in aluminum and steel production to eat away, dissolve, and erode all the impurities and provide that layer and then prevent oxidation. And then you have fluorspar also in the battery space that's irreplaceable. Rob, just going back to what I was talking about, Batman and Robin, people were focusing on the cathode technology for batteries from NMC-A11, which is cobalt, manganese, and nickel. You probably interviewed some of your other audience. And it's too expensive, so they replace that with transition metal as iron in the cathode. So that's been done. So the anode is carbon, that's cheap, and the cathode now is iron, is cheap. And they're going after lithium with sodium. So you're looking at a lot of substitution in the battery space. However, fluorspar has been one of the indispensable element, and fluorspar acts as a electrolyte, phosphate electrolyte, to be carrying the positive ion in the batteries, whether it's sodium or whether it's lithium. So these positive charge ions have to be married to the fluorspar electrolyte to be carried between the anode and the cathode. So we talked about semiconductor, we talked about uranium, we talked about batteries, and then we talked about solar energy require fluorspar to be texturing the silicon to the optimal texture and shape for maximum absorption of light. And then fluorspar has a very low melting temperature, and that's why when fluorspar is married to carbon, become a polymer, that is the most stable element on Earth. It's almost like an exotic Victoria's Secret model married a Chad, right? All of a sudden it become the most stable element, which acts as an ideal candidate for refrigerant to accommodate the climate change. These fluorspar hydrofluoride fluorocarbon has a very low melting temperature and has a very stable compound. And so then what happens is when you has a negative boiling point of negative 20. So when this liquid enter into your room of 30 degrees Celsius, it absorbs the heat and vaporize in the piping. And then when it exits the room, it will be compressed and it will be converted back into liquid. So these fluoropolymer compounds are critical in addressing the climate change needs in giving you the rooms that's well air conditioned. So it's the Robin to the Batman, And you're seeing one of the reasons it's underlooked because it's so cheap, because it was not being extensively utilized. So fluorspar prices has gone from about 5 cents, less than 5 cents a pound. So that's about $100 a ton to the prices are almost quadrupled in the last 20 years. And right now it's trading at just under 20 cents a pound, or about $450 a ton. And if you look at the ascent of fluorspar, it's been fairly steady until just 3 years ago, when China became a net importer of fluorspar. And because they were producing so much steel, aluminum, and also in particular of the transition into the EV space, and also the energy storage required for the explosion of the solar power that's come online. So this energy storage and battery is really the principal driver for China to become a net importer, and that propelled fluorspar prices 50% up from just 5 years ago.
I suppose let's dive in a little bit further, obviously in the economy side, specifically how the demand and supply dynamics when it actually comes to fluorspar.
Okay. A bit of mining history and background. I've been at it for 25 years. I know a bit more than I want to know about mining and processing and recovering metallurgy and whatnot. Once fluorspar usually is an underground operation, a very narrowly structurally controlled mineral. It's not like a copper porphyry, and the typical width is around 3 to 5 meters. When you dig fluorspar out of the ground, it's around 30 to 50% calcium fluoride. So that requires to be concentrated and floated through a typical flotation plant as you do with silver and other base metals. And then from there is further concentrated to 80% plus. So that will be for met spar to go into the smelters for aluminum and steel production. And then it requires further concentrated to be 95 to 99%. So that is one that's go to your hydrofluoric acid to be married to the to go into the semiconductors, to going into the electrolyte for batteries, and that's also the one that goes into your nuclear reactors. Overall, around 30% of fluorspar production goes into steel and aluminum production, and the majority, the remainder, goes into uranium, goes into levitating uranium to be enriched. So overall, as I mentioned, fluorspar pricing right now is around 20 cents a pound, has been on steady uptrend, but that trajectory seems to be going somewhat exponential. So I do believe that in the months and maybe years to come, you're gonna see fluorspar appearing under the spotlight. You know what? Much like rare earth. I think rare earth is another unsung hero, right? People don't talk about rare earth too much, but nonetheless, trains and magnets and televisions and high-tech military equipment all require rare earth. It's not the main actor, but you cannot go without it. I think much of King is in this untold fluorspar story, and that's why I'm quite pleased to be sort of coming on your show and give you that introduction to fluorspar as an early, even the price has gone up 300%. However, I think it's still in the very early going, and because of the characteristics of fluorspar, as I mentioned, it'll be a while before a replacement for fluorspar can be found. Usually, that will be oxygen, because it's also negative charge, just like fluorspar. But the oxygen has a couple of problems. It oxidizes. It likes to eat away other metals. It's not as dedicated as, say, fluorspar. Once fluorspar finds the right partner, right, it's glued. But oxides will sometimes wander around, and that could be a problem. And the other problem with the oxygen is it heats up easily, and that's why oxygen is not a good candidate for batteries in cars or in energy storage. So I think all in all, the economics of fluorspar is still tolerable, acceptable to these various applications. I think over time, it's going to enjoy about another at least a decade of being highly being utilized, and which creates an opportunity for investors who's looking for undercover story with strong fundamentals.
I suppose following on from that, why do you think the fluorspar could be in the spotlight soon? And what are the key factors that make you come to this conclusion? And I suppose what's the driving force behind fluorspar being more in the news, because obviously it is needed?
Right. China is going to bring fluorspar to the under the spotlight. And the reason is China produces today 66 million tons of fluorspar per year. And the global production is 10 million tons. The number two came out is Mexico. They produce 1 million tons, just around 10% of the global supply. But Mexico's production, approximately half of that goes to the United States for all the different things you talk about, for steel and uranium and aluminum and batteries. And then the other half catering to South America, which has no fluorspar production. Mongolia is the number 3 fluorspar production. They're just behind Mexico at 1 million tons. But half of Mongolia's production go to China. The other half goes to Russia. So for any base heavy industry that require aluminum and steel, right? Uranium power, nuclear power, they all require fluorspar. And now we're getting a acute situation. That's why fluorspar kind of prices gone up 50%, because China starts to outsourcing fluorspar. And so they're making investments in Africa. They're making very heavy investments in Mongolia, which is where I'm at right now. There is literally no fluorspar available, project available. It's all being gobbled up by the mega Chinese chemical companies, conglomerates, and they're paying top dollars for it for a very small resource. So I think so. First of all, China is going to eat away fluorspar, and then people are going to start taking notice if they were not able to source fluorspar for their mission critical applications. That's the first thing. Second thing, as a fluorspar is embarking on the same trajectory as rare earth, and I think that trajectory is accelerated with Donald Trump's policy of being self-sustainable. So, for example, Elon Musk Tesla just talked about creating the first lithium and phosphate batteries in the United States for their cars. Well, they're going to need a lot of fluorspar. And where's that coming from? Because the United States doesn't produce enough fluorspar. And then if Donald Trump is talking about, just step a 30% tariff on aluminum and steel from Canada and from elsewhere, well, if you're going to expand on your steel and aluminum production, where's that fluorspar going to come from? And then there is mega semiconductor plants being built in Arizona by TSMC in Taiwan, of which I'm the native of. Well, if you're going to produce these huge semiconductors, where are the fluorspar gas going to come from to etching these plant semiconductors? And furthermore, with the advent of artificial intelligence, Jensen Huang, which was a Taiwan native, he's talking about making big multi-billion-dollar investments along with the Saudis and the Japanese of SoftBank. Well, all this artificial intelligence, the elements, the foundation of that is semiconductors, which require fluorspar. But in order to run them, you're going to require enormous amount of power, maybe doubling or tripling of the current power output of the United States. And where are you going to get that power coming from? Uranium, nuclear plants, well, that requires fluorspar. Solar, which is really by far the largest output or increase in the global power production, require fluorspar. And for the solar panels. And Rob, in order to balance the solar power has to be implemented to treat as a base load, you have to have energy storage for the energy for solar to be a base load. I mean, hospital would need power to be operating and treat patients at night, and the sun only shines during the day. And then further up, the infrastructure development in United States is so antiquated. In order for solar power to transmit that excess power from Utah and California and Nevada to, say, Michigan, where the sun doesn't shine, well, you're going to have to build an electrical grid. And guess what, Rob? All the high voltage switches require fluorspar, because sulfur hexafluoride is the best choice of insulator, gaseous insulator. of high voltage, you're talking about 600 watt, 600 kilovolts. I mean, these high voltage, if you are a meter apart, right? So they're dying to kill people, not dying to kill people, but they're highly conductive with such high voltage, and the sulfur hexafluoride is the choice for insulator gas. So if you think about it overall, as I mentioned to you, that also, I don't know if you know, Rob, you're British, but majority of the pharmaceutical pills come from the UK and Europe, and Bayer and GlaxoSmithKline.
SmithKline. Yeah.
They're all European pharmaceutical companies, and Donald Trump is talking about stop building pills in the pharmaceuticals in the United States. Well, guess what? 20% of the pills require fluorspar. So I think it's a long-winded answer, but I just cannot underemphasize sort of the Robin Hood nature of complementing the Batman. Every verticals of Trump's initiative touches on fluorspar, and it would not be long before Trump realizes that, hey, you're going to have to need fluorspar. And one thing about Kentucky, as I mentioned, fluorspar is not scalable. There is fluorspar that exists in the byproduct of phosphate, but you're talking 3 to 5% range of fluorspar in phosphate. So it's not going to move the needle unless fluorspar prices were to jump significantly, from the 2 to 3x, which I believe it probably will. So the last point, I just sort of put a lid on the fluorspar economics. Right now, fluorspar prices at 20 cents a pound. I think for your metals investors, better to be sort of talking about on a per pound unit, and that is about 30% of price of lead, which is around 80 cents a pound, or 1/6 the price of zinc, which is about $1.20 a pound, and that's about 5% of copper that's trading at $5 a pound. So I think that when fluorspar gets to another double or triple from where we are, close to the prices of base metals, and then coupled with the government initiative or mandate or maybe subsidies to cultivate fluorspar production stimulate fluorspar production in the United States, I think it's going to be within this current administration, you're going to see potentially doubling of the fluorspar price. And you can clearly see that trajectory. It takes 10 years for fluorspar to double from 2010 to 2020, but yet only take less than 5 years for fluorspar to go up 50%, right? From 2020 to 2025. So on the same trajectory, fluorspar prices could double again in the next 2 to 3 years, and could double on that again in the next 2 to 3 years. So potentially it could be a four-bagger by 2030. And the interesting fact, as I mentioned to you, the opportunity they gain is that there is no fluorspar production in the United States, which is a bit of shocking. And I think there is just a lot of elements, as I mentioned in the periodic table, that to sustain the U.S. and grow the U.S. economy and for the economy to be self-sustainable, that there's going to be a renaissance in these critical elements to production to start in the United States.
I can't let you go without speaking about precious metals. So I just wondered if you can give a little bit of a summary of the precious metals market at the moment, obviously both gold and silver.
In 2021, on my Twitter, I said, now is the time to get into gold. That was 1800. Actually, the way and the way that gold rise and the price target took me by surprise on both ends. I was expecting gold from 1800 to 2800, and we can talk about it was the cup and handle formation. If you were to extrapolate the downside to the neckline 2000 to the upside, so 2800 was my target because the downside was 1300. The neckline was 2000, and if you flip it onto the other side, right, so 2800. And on the logs, that's on the linear scale. On the log scale, then the target of 3200 was above my target because it was 50% was it almost double from the bottom to the neck, and then if you apply 70% increase from the neck to the peak, then it will be 3400. I was expecting gold to correct after that level was reached. So I was expecting maybe the path to be more exponential and then followed by a big correction. But it was not the case, Rob. Gold took about 2 years to go from 1800 to 3300, and that is almost entirely, I believe, a reallocation by the well-to-do. It has nothing to do with inflation. If it's got to do with inflation, then gold corrected back to 2000 at a $60 oil price. It's not got to do with the inflation. It's not got to do with the economies. And it's all to do with reallocation of the well-to-dos. The Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos, the central bank diversification. So the way I look at it, in short, is gold is going to be staying at least around $3,000 to $3,500 level. The 50-day moving right now is sitting at about 50-day moving average at 3,300. It's hugging that 50-day moving average, but it's well above the 200-day moving average, which is around 2,800. And so my view on gold is the guys are leaving, the early speculators are leaving the station, but the strong fundamentals are continuing to attract institutional investors. So it's going to hover around 3,300 to 3,500, but I see it's going to have a hard time breaking out of that, because anybody who wanted to get into gold already did. It took over $1 trillion to get to 1,800 to where we are today. So I think gold is going to hover around this 3,300. Silver is a different story. Silver was, I was expecting silver to take out $50 2 years ago when gold took out 2,000. But silver never got off the ground. I think part of that is because of the collapse of the Chinese economy, and of which Chinese is just equally sort of has an insatiable appetite for silver investment as well as the North American crowd. And so I think silver should have taken out $50 already 2 years ago. It is not. The question is, your question, good timing. I do believe silver is going to take out $35, which it has, and it's going to be embarking on $50 in the next 6 weeks. And that is John Lee's call dating on July the 9th. And the reason for that was, part of the reason silver was slow to catching up to gold is, first of all, as I mentioned, the collapse of the Chinese real estate market and the collapse of the Chinese economy, of which is still being felt reverberally throughout the Chinese travel, everything has come down to almost a squishing halt. And the second reason I say silver has been very slow until recently is a lot of the silver investors were waiting for gold to correct. A lot of pundits always say gold is when the 2,800 is going to correct back to 2,000, once it go back to the support level, which is the resistance, and it's going to go kind of like a zigzag, right? And it's going to go. It never did, Rob. It never did. And so, and then people were thinking, well, if I'm a silver investor, like many of my colleagues and friends and acquaintances, they were waiting for gold to go back to 2,000 because silver is always acting in the shadow, gold's shadow. What I mean by that, if gold went down 1%, silver went down 2%, right? If dollar were to stage a comeback, and if dollar go up 1%, gold will go down 2%, and silver will go down 5%. So there is a tremendous pent-up demand for silver. I think the silver bugs are, you know what? I gave up. Gold is never going to go below 3,000, and silver is never going to go below $25 or $30. So we are entering that epiphany moment right now. And that's why you see silver went from 34 to 36 in a few days. And I went on my Twitter in May. I said, this is the time you want to go. You have to get in silver. You should be buying silver now at 37, then to be buying silver at 34. Because historically, there's only 2 times that silver went out above $35, 1980 and 2012. Both times silver went from $35 to $50 within 2 weeks. And this is what we're witnessing right now. As somebody who studied silver market for 25 years, I am seeing clearly and watching the tape on a day-to-day basis. It is a very clear to me as black and white, 50 shades of gray is black and white, and sunset and versus sunrise. There is an absolute strategic reallocation of gold to silver right now. Something you don't see once in a decade. The last time I saw that was 2021, and before that was 2012. And before that, I was a child in 1980, so I didn't see what happened. I was a toddler. And what I mean by that, Rob, is it doesn't matter what the dollar index is doing. It does not matter what gold is doing. It doesn't matter what everything else is doing. Gold could be down 2% and silver could be green. And you have days where the cartels whack the market and you are open at 9:30 in the morning. And usually it takes 3 days for the margin calls to be cleansed for silver to stage a rebound. It's not doing that. It's not even waiting until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually, the bucks was like the silver bucks will start snipple away with some of the trades at 2 in the afternoon before market close. They're not even waiting until 11 in the morning Eastern. They started getting into. So these are all extremely positive signs. And this sign is also echoed by platinum. And people saying that, wait a second, if you say silver is a good investment based on historical gold to silver ratio of 70, and right now the ratio is at 90, well, the historical gold to platinum ratio is 0.7, and now it's 5, it's 3, right? Silver gold is trading at 200% premium to platinum when it should be trading at a discount. And the same fundamentals I mentioned to you earlier before the start of the call on oil. Historical norm is an ounce of gold by 10 barrels of oil, and now it's buying 40 barrels of oil. So people are saying that So people are saying like, what is 40 barrels? That's right. So people are saying, what is going on in this world? And so long, the catch. I think the takeaway is, Rob, so long as gold stays in this $33,000 platform. And there's going to be a lot of rebalancing of that profit taking into a lot of the other commodities. And you're also witnessing a breakout of copper. So right now, commodity is become an investment option because because I think relatively speaking, but even with gold at 3,000 and oil at 60, relative to the equity market, it's still trading at a very discount based on historical gold to Dow ratio. And I think a lot of people track that. And so I think what we're seeing is, so I think right now the commodity boom and rally is not to do with the fundamentals. It's not to do with China or consumption. It's all strictly to do with the reallocation of investable capitals.
Yeah. And lastly, what's the snapshot or outlook for CleanTech over the sort of next 6 to 12 months?
We're very, very bullish. Like I bought 2 million shares in the market since the news release. And we announced the news on July the 2nd. We can't dictate the timing when we signed the contract, which took us a year to prospect, identify, negotiate, and close. But yet the company already traded around 3% of a company's float. Of that, 50% of the shares is being stashed away by insiders. So we're already trading close to 5% of the company outstanding shares available in the market. The company's market cap, Rob, is $4 million market cap. It's a fraction of what it was during the heydays of nickel. That's 3 years ago when we were 100 million market cap, or during the heydays of vanadium 8 years ago when we were, again, $100 million market cap. So we're trading on the lowest valuation ever in the company's history. And we still have a good vanadium project in Nevada that's fully permitted that we spent over $30 million to date, where we are proven to be competent in working in the United States because our vanadium project is actually in public federal land. We managed to get the project permitted in less than 4 years with a positive record of decision from the Bureau of Land Management. And this first this first project we acquired, Campbell-Crotser, is only the first of several to come in this very prospective belt, of which we're studying over 30 other prospects within this district. So both in terms of valuation, in share structure, we sold the nickel project to the Aboriginals, First Nations in Canada, because they received a lot of the government funding, and they said, well, John, I don't need you anymore. And, why don't we just have an amicable handshake? We had to sell the project to them. We still have close to $3 million in the bank. So we're not looking for financing. There's not going to be shadow volume coming out of the woodworks. Very, very bullish. No financing on the horizon, and additional acquisition and development and good news to come for our Fluorspar project. And hopefully in the weeks and months to come, some additional visibility on Fluorspar. Not only just from CleanTech, but from the mainstream media, because it is absolutely going to be embarking on the identical sort of a storyline with Rare Earth, in my view.
John, thank you for your time. Really appreciate you giving an overview of obviously CleanTech and give us, I suppose, a history lesson in Fluorspar and what your predictions are and why it's obviously so essential in what we're doing and in a lot of applications. So appreciate you sharing your thoughts and obviously sharing your thoughts around the precious metals and what's happening in that space. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to know some more information about CleanTech and Fluorspar, how can they go about doing that, and what social media platform channels are you on?
Yes, my cleantechctv.com is our company's website. The symbol is CTV on the Toronto Ventures Exchange. On the OTC, QB is OTCFF. I have a Twitter account. I'm not as active as I was before, but you can see all of my calls in gold at 1,800 and silver at $35 in May. And Rob, I look forward to come back onto your program maybe 2 years from now. The oracle usually, the prophet usually will call a target or a time, but they never do both. But for me, I've stated my my prophecy, which is $50 sometime in August for silver, and Fluorspar prices is going to double in the next 2 to 3 years, and maybe potentially quadruple before 2030. So hope to come on your program to chat about it in the months and years to come.
Yeah, certainly. And obviously, given that prediction, hopefully our listeners will follow up with you maybe September time to see if those predictions were right.
Look forward to it, Rob.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. And yeah, more than welcome to come back on maybe next year or even the following year afterwards and give us an update.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.
No worries. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Obviously, John has explained a lot around Fluorspar and the essential and what it's needed for and why it's essential, but not often talked about. And obviously, John's given a good overview of what it's needed for. So certainly an education. So thank you for listening. Appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. And again, on this particular commodity, so we can get more people understanding what Fluorspar is and why it's needed. So please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.